Can we get some great sounding subwoofer bass out of an underseat location? Here on the channel, I've been working on a custom underseat enclosure for 3 13-inch subwoofers in a truck. To start this process, I first designed my enclosure, which is sealed, but in order to get the proper air volume for these 3 13-inch subwoofers, I had to do a slight seat modification with a 2.5-inch lift. With the enclosure designed, we first cut all of our parts, with the most complicated being these stacked corner pieces that allow us to match the front corners of the seat. Then we assembled those parts while also doing some advanced router work to trim those stacked corners to the correct angle. We knew that we wanted to make this enclosure robust, but still wanted it to have some custom appeal, so we also went through how to add these custom accents and coat it with this coating. Now that that's all done, in this video we need to install it and test it out. Really quick before we get into it, a thank you to our channel sponsor, Crutchfield. Have you ever made a purchase and then a week later you see that same item you just purchased is now on sale? That's always a bummer, but with Crutchfield, there is no need to worry. With their 60-day price drop protection, if there's a lower price on that item within 60 days, you just give them a call when the lower price is active and they'll cover the difference. I've personally done this a few times and the process is super easy. In fact, I've also done it over their online chat and the refund was quickly processed. Crutchfield has great customer service. That's why I personally used them for so many years, long before I even started the channel. And even better yet, you can save on your next car audio purchase with the link down in the video description. So to kick things off here, let me bring you guys up to speed on the install of the enclosure. With this being an underseat enclosure, installation isn't anything super complex. We obviously just had to place it under the seats. And I can lift these up here so you guys can get a little bit of a better look, but we did need to mount this. So what I've done is I've rigidly mounted to this bracket here, which is obviously part of the seat structure, and rigidly mounted to the vehicle. This way the enclosure cannot easily move. I've done that with a good large bolt in multiple different locations. You'll notice that although I used a lot of the underseat location here, there is still some available space here if I'd like to use this for storage. I do also want to point out one more time, now that we have this positioned in the vehicle, you can see those accent pieces that I added to the side of the enclosure and how those match the door trim here, along with the front of the enclosure and how it has a similar design look to the factory floor mats. Now for a recap on how this is all powered, here's my amplifier rack install behind the rear seats. If you are new here, this is all covered on the channel. You can go back and check out those previous videos. I have a JL Audio VX800/8i, which is powering all of the speakers in this vehicle. So I have a front active 3-way set. That's the first 6 channels, and then the last 2 channels for the total of 8. Those last 2 channels are powering the back doors. And then I send a DSP process signal out of the VXI amplifier into the JL Audio RD1500/1. The RD1500/1 gives me 1500 watts RMS of rated power to work with, and that's a conservative rating, and the 13 TW5s that I'm using are each rated between 250 and 600 watts RMS. This amplifier is perfectly within the power band, and this is going to sound awesome. I've already done a lot of tuning on the rest of the speakers in the vehicle through the VXI amplifier. I've done all of my levels and gain setting. I've also verified that polarity is correct by doing a polarity test. I talk about this more in this past video up in the corner of the screen. But now we want to evaluate and tune for the addition of our subwoofers, so let's get that set up. So to take some measurements and do some tuning here in vehicle, we are using the JL Audio Max measurement system, which has this microphone array. So there are 5 microphones here, and this allows us to get a spatial average in the listening position. Here's a better look at the Max, and what I'm able to do here is send a signal out of the Max into my system, and that's going to be my pink noise that I'm going to play. I'm also connected to the VXI amplifier through this USB, and then I'm connected to both the VXI amplifier and the Max system through this USB, which goes out of the vehicle over here to my computer test stand. Pink noise is equal energy per octave, and it sounds a little something like static. Since I'm just playing the subwoofers right now, you're only going to hear that low rumble of the subwoofer frequencies. Whereas if we're playing the mids and highs, it sounds like this. So we're now ready to perform some tests. I need to close up the vehicle. And now we can dive into our computer. So here we are, my friends. Let's first get that pink noise playing, and let's unmute our subwoofers. And I want to point out that this is completely untuned right now. This is the response, and of course we're going to see some peaks and nulls, and that's because this is the in-vehicle response. This is not the anechoic response. We have the vehicle actually impacting how this sound performs. Now I want to give us a little bit more resolution here, so let's change our banding so that we see a little bit more detail. Now notice, although we have a peak in the 48 up to 50 hertz range, we do have output all the way down below 20 hertz. And we can actually verify this really quick. Let's turn on a 20 hertz crossover, and if we start to go up on this, you can see that it is actually cutting away that information there, but we don't want to crossover. We want to play as low as we can, so let's do that. So definitely great to see that we are playing nice and low. Now, let's say that we do want to EQ this kind of hump away. Generally, I know you don't want to remove bass, but what I've done here is I've actually reduced the overall bass level. You can see I can control that here. If I refresh the data, let's go back to about 50%. That's right around our target curve right now. And you can see we could always bring that bass back in if we want to when we're actually listening to the system. But let's EQ this to match our target curve. Depending on the software you are using, you may just want to bring, one of your EQ bands over here, and you can kind of just refresh. Let's see if we could kind of remove that information manually. You can see that we're closer to our target there. Let's reset that quick, but what we could do in our software here is we can use the auto set EQ functionality, and what that's going to do is quickly apply several different bands of EQ to try to get this blue RTA microphone measurement to match to our purple target curve. In layman's terms, that purple target curve is the goal for how we want our measured response to be. So I want to make sure I have the correct data selected. That's our multi-mic, and we are on the correct output channel, of course, and then we want to change our target. It's already on subwoofer, so we're good to go there. Let's do our auto set EQ, and it's going to automatically apply a bunch of different bands of EQ here to better match the curve. Now again, I want to point out, obviously this removed a ton of energy to kind of get rid of some of those peaks that we had, but because we did this at a lower volume level, if we did want to increase our subwoofer bass and increase that energy later, we can do so. Now we are in pretty high resolution right now, so let's change our banding a little bit, and you can see how nice and smooth this bass performance is and how closely it matches our target. Now, as part of the full tuning process for the full system, you would definitely want to make sure that you check the relationship between the subwoofers and your mid-bass drivers. You want to make sure that they are good and in phase at the crossover point. This is something that we can do during the full tuning process, so if you guys want to learn more about that, check out my previous past video. But for now, we want to focus on evaluating the performance of the subwoofer enclosure itself. So although I showed you how we could EQ the subwoofer performance to a target curve, I'm actually going to negate that for now with a different tune preset that I have set up in the vehicle so that we can just listen to some of the different test tones. That way you guys can get a feel for how much output there is at each different frequency, kind of stock as is without a DSP being involved. As we go through each of these test tones, the point here is not to evaluate how loud they are, but more to evaluate the presence. I want to see how low we could play with these subwoofers. And part of the reason that I don't want to just rip it is I don't want to blow out the gain on my microphone here. I could easily make it sound like it's crazy loud just by blowing out the gain, but we're not going to do that. We're going to make it so that my microphone is not clipping. Here is 80 hertz. Next up, we have 63 hertz, and I definitely have a resonance somewhere in the vehicle here that I'm going to need to address. You'll probably be able to hear it. Here's 63. Next up, 50, and then 40, now 31, and 25. Finally, and in this case it's going to be loud, here is a sweep from 25 hertz on up. Now let's get a feel for the real output with some music. For now, I'm gonna play some royalty-free tracks in this video, but I will also make a secondary video that will be on my second channel that will have some more recognizable music for you guys. Here's a track called I Did That. The 313 TW5s definitely get down, have a ton of output, more than enough to shake the interior cabin of the vehicle, also get the mirrors moving. Definitely finding some resonances that I didn't know about previously in this vehicle that I'm going to have to address with some sound treatment. Nevertheless, great for bass, but also I'm finding really good for just music in general, a very musical subwoofer. Here's another track for you to evaluate the musical performance. This one is called Bright Eyed Blues. In summary, some great sounding subs that definitely get down, that can rip it when I want to. Now don't forget that I have a full video about this full process of building this enclosure leading up to now. You can check out those other videos here on the channel. And if you're new here, I'd love to have you as a subscriber. Also remember that you can get 60-day price drop protection with our show sponsor Crutchfield, and you can also save on your next car audio purchase at the link down in the video description. A big thanks to them along with Jerry and the rest of the Patreon membership team for making these videos possible, and thank you guys so much for tuning in and watching.